Well, it's a rare occasion that we get to have Nehemia Gordon here in the studio with us and to do the questions and answers. This is usually reserved for a coffee shop on Emek Rephaim, where Nehemia and I try to get together every time I'm in Israel and he's in Israel together. And we, this last spring, spent 4 hours over a single cup of coffee and said, yeah, we got to do this. And Nehemia's had a lot of questions that come in, and so Nehemia's back with us. Nehemia, good to have you back, and good to have some of your questions here.
It's great to be here, Michael. So, all right, this question came from Linnell Edie, who said, you've spent so much of your life studying. What is your favorite scripture, and why is it your favorite? And that's just such a, that's such an easy question for me. But you go first. What's your verse, Michael?
I've got several, but the one my granddaughter asked me, she said Saba, which is in Japanese pickled mackerel,
Hebrew.
or grandfather in Hebrew.
Yeah.
But Saba, what's your favorite Bible verse? I said, well, it's in the winter. Yeshua's down the Dead Sea Valley, and he's having dinner at a Pharisee's house, and he's just insulting them. And then the sages are there with them. The Sadducees they said, are you going to insult us too? And he turns right around and insults them. And it is like, this is beautiful. This is the real Yeshua. It's not the 6-pound, 8-ounce baby Jesus. It's in your face. This is what the word says. You guys are completely out of line. I love it. That's what my favorite verse is.
Are you saying Yeshua was a Marine like you? Well, look, my favorite verse is a no-brainer. It's the first verse I ever learned in the Bible. This is the verse that, when I could barely speak, my father had me recite after him, and it's Deuteronomy 6:4, the Shema. Shema Yisrael. The way I learned it as a child was Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Now I know it's in the Hebrew, Shema Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu, Yehovah Echad. Hear, O Israel, Yehovah is our Elohim, our God. Yehovah is one. And what I love about the verse, that it just seems like such a simple thing. And it is a simple thing in many ways, but it's also very complex. There's so much to it. And for me, there are all these associations with it. The stories I was taught growing up is that the last words on your lips before you die must be this verse, if you can, that as you die, you speak these words, and the last word as your breath goes out is echad, one, that you proclaim the oneness of God and your belief in him. And we have stories in the Jewish tradition of people who were martyred. There's one rabbi who they skinned him alive with hot combs.
It was Akiva, was it not?
Rabbi Akiva. The Romans executed him, and his dying words were Shema Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu, and back then they still spoke it. Yehovah Eloheinu, they spoke the name Yehovah Echad. And I have to wonder, Michael, and I know I'm going off the reservation here, but I have to wonder, we have different gospels that talk about the last words Yeshua spoke. One gospel, it's Eli, Eli, lama azavtani, my God, why have you forsaken me, and is it is finished? And I have to wonder, when he was up there on the cross, coming from this culture, the Jewish culture of the martyr speaking these words as he dies, I have to wonder if these were not some of the words he spoke up there on the cross. Shema Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu, Yehovah Echad. I know that when they asked him what's the most important commandment, he said, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And he says there's another one like it. And in one version of that, he quotes the Shema, Shema Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu, Yehovah Echad, Ve'ahavta et Yehovah Elohecha b'chol levavecha b'chol nafshecha b'chol meodecha. That is, the very following verse, it says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Hear, O Israel, Yehovah is our God, Yehovah is one. Love Yehovah, and it says, you love Yehovah your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might. And that was clearly he said that was his favorite verse, or the most important verse in any event. And I have to wonder if that wasn't some of the last words on his lips as he died.
Well, we've talked about this, the Eli, Eli, lama azavtani, that this is the opening of Psalm 2.
Yeah,
And
Psalm
then-
22, yeah.
Yeah, Psalm 22. And so when you look at the whole psalm,
Yeah.
and then you see how the people are responding,
Yeah.
then you see that, it's not, these are the words that are recorded that he's spoken, but for him to quote the entire psalm that's being played out and the people responding
Right.
accordingly, that all makes sense. So.
One of the really interesting things about that, these words, my God, why have you forsaken me? So in the Greek Gospel of Matthew and in the Greek version of Luke, those words are quoted in Aramaic as Eli, Eli, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. And the really cool thing, we were looking just the other day together at the Pshita, which is the Aramaic translation of the Greek. Some people say it's the original that the Greek is translated from, but in the Greek it says, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which is to say, my God, why have you forsaken me? So if you were writing this in Aramaic, you wouldn't have the words, which is to say, my God, why have you forsaken me? Because that's already what the words mean, meaning
Right.
you wouldn't. And in the Pshita, it has it twice. It has
and say it.
Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which is to say, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani.
Right, exactly.
Why would you say it twice?
And this is why,
Right. Now, the beautiful thing is in the Hebrew Matthew, it says, and he cried out in the Hebrew tongue, Bilashon HaKodesh, Eli, Eli, lama azavtani. My God, why have you forsaken me in Hebrew? And it specifically identifies the language that he's speaking as Hebrew. And if this is correct, which I think it is, it means that the Hebrew is what he spoke. It was translated into Aramaic, and then from Aramaic translated into Greek, and then from Greek translated into Aramaic as the Pshita, into a different
that's
dialect
right.
of Aramaic. So, wow, that's what happened. I mean,
Right.
it's
Well,
like that's the
Nehemia,
breadcrumbs that show us what really happened.
And that
It's a
is
smoking
exactly
gun.
the position of the Syrian Orthodox Church, because everything they do is in Aramaic. They use the Aramaic text. And I was with the head scholar of the Syrian Orthodox Church, and he said, no, we don't use the Peshitta. That is an Aramaic translation of a later Greek text.
I mean, they probably use it the way Christians use the King James Version, but the Christians, other than the independent Baptists, don't claim that this is the original Bible. They just say, it's the translation from the Greek and the Hebrew and the Old Testament, right?
Yeah.
So and Pshita means the simple translation. So
Right. That's a simplified version. It's like Good News for Modern Man. Let's not degrade the King James, okay? Good News for Modern Man, or
is that the name of the translation?
It is, or the complete Jewish Bible, which has.
Or there's the Message, which is like a paraphrase.
There you go. I say the complete Jewish Bible, which has Yiddish words in it, like Yeshua speaking Yiddish. I mean, well, where does that come from? but it's fun. I mean, it's a fun translation. My children enjoyed it when they were little children. Again, we can get more critical on that, because again, we know that the early church fathers, even in the Christian tradition, said that Matthew wrote his gospel in the Hebrew language.
Yeah.
Several did their best to translate it,
Yeah.
and so we see that Aramaic was next, and then Greek has the Aramaic words still in it.
Right.
Not Hebrew, but the Aramaic
Which means
words.
we have these like second and third hand translations, and sometimes fourth hand. Martin Luther, who eventually became this vicious anti-Semite, but he actually started out the first few years of his ministry being pro-Jewish.
Yeah.
And he made this statement early in his ministry where he said, and I quote this in my book, A Prayer to Our Father, that I wrote together with Keith Johnson. He says that Hebrew is the source, that is the spring, and he says Greek is the stream that flows out of the Hebrew source, and Latin is the downstream puddle. and if that's so, what is the English? It's like the sprinkles left from the puddle. But going back to that verse Shema Yisrael, there's this amazing story that I learned at the Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum, where it describes this event where there were Jews who, as they were walking to the gas chambers, their last words they proclaimed were Shema Yisrael. And I saw that at the museum, and I'm a skeptic, Michael. I said, how on earth could anybody know what people spoke the last moment before they went into the gas chambers? Like, did the Gestapo agents tell us this? SS guards? It doesn't make sense. And I found out that there were Jews whose job it was to remove the bodies, and they wrote down on pieces of toilet paper and whatever they could get their hands on, they wrote these things and hid them in canisters, and those canisters were discovered. And so we actually have these Auschwitz papers, these Auschwitz scrolls that were discovered in the ashes. And so this is a real thing. Jews dying in the Holocaust, their last words were Shema Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu, Yehovah Echad.
Well, those are beautiful words.
Music
Beautiful
to my
words.
ears.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have Nehemia Gordon back with us and find out more from the Karaite files and so also from the files of our V fellowships that they sent in. So join us again next time, but right now we have a word for you, our sponsors out there. Thank you.